Amen.
Amen. Okay, so we are in Hazinu, section 44, building the back part of the Nukva of Zeranpin. In order to understand this passage, I have provided two images. The top image is from the Elon Gedal, which I compiled in exactly 8 days. And the image on the bottom is from the Sefer Eitz Chaim Shabgan. So, Chazinu, 44, building the back part of the Nukva of Zeranpin. A synopsis. Rabbi Shimon tells us how Malchus becomes attached to Zeranpin, the male, which is Zeranpin, spread into his brain lobe of Das. This is because Da'as is the originating point of the Chesadim and the Gevuros. Furthermore, it's been explained how the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima form and create the Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of Zeranpin. Also, it has been explained how the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima contain within inside of it the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Abba. These are best understood if we personify the understanding as a kalim or vessel and its respective light. So, with this basic understanding, when it's talking about spreading into the brain lobe of Das and the corridors and chambers were filled, namely Netzach, Hod, and Yisod, and Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes, it's talking about the spreading of the Chesadim and the Gevuros, which are mentioned in the next passage. This occurs because there are aspects of Abba and aspects of Ima. In the first image that I shared, you can see how there are 10 names of Yudke Vavke and 10 names of Eheya, and these are 260 plus 210, which equal 470, or the numerical value of Ein Tav of Das. The best way to understand this is that the 5 Chasadim and the 5 Gevuros, in essence, represent the light, or Shefa, flowing from the 5 Partsufs of Abba and Ima, respectfully. And so they emerge from Da'as and they spread through Chesed, Gevura, Tifres, Netzach, and Hod. They happen to pool themselves in the sphere of Yisod. So in the image, you will see that the red and blue lines spread from Da'as. So you'll see that there are 5 lines precisely coming from Chokmah and Bina, 5 blue lines and 5 red lines. And should you scrutinize the location of those lines, you'll find 1 blue line and 1 red line is in Keter, 1 blue line and 1 red line is in Chokmah, 1 blue line and red line is in Bina, 1 blue line and 1 red line is in connected to Tiferes, the general center sphera of the Parsuf of Zerayin in each of these aspects, and 1 blue line and red line is to the Nukva. So that these 10 sphirot, which collectively have the numerical value of Ein Tav, are divided into 5. And they are gathered into the Ein Tav of Da'as, from which it spreads from Da'as into Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, and Hod. They then pool themselves into the sphera of Yisod. So perhaps I can provide another image dealing with some of these concepts that are being discussed. Let's see if I can find one. So it continues. Da'as starts at the top of the head. So the top of the head refers to the head of the Partsuf called Leah. Because the top of Leah, an example, her Keter, emerges from the backside of that Da'as. It was explained that the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod form the Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of one world, and that this is in relation to the male. However, it was also explained that Malchus is in the chamber of Yisod. Therefore, when the Netzach, Hod, Yisod of Ima, which personify aspects of Zarinpin itself and her aspect, form these brains of the Zarinpin as a total Partsuf here in Yetzirah, it causes Malchus to rupture from the body or emerge from the body, because Zarinpin is a male Partsuf, and so the conversation here begins with the male. The idea is that the female could not remain inside of the male Partsuf and emerges specifically from Da'as. This refers to the Malchus specifically of Bina, which emerges first, and it forms the Partsuf that's called Leah. Thus, Leah is a seruf or rearranging of the letters of Ochel, which means the tent, and contains the letters Aleph, Lamed, and He, which are the first three letters of the word Elohim, and hints to Bina, which is also called by the same name of Elohim. And so it says, Da'as starts at the top of the head and spreads throughout the whole body and its chest. This refers to the spreading of the Chasadim and Gevuros, arms, and the rest of it. Behind it, the spark is touched by the hard lamp. This spark refers to Malchus of Ima and refers to the first Partsuf of Leah, which in this case is called a hard lamp, which is the illumination of the left column of Bina. It glows and produces one head blocked on all directions. This refers to the Partsuf of Leah, because it emerges outside of the body of Zarinpin and is considered to be blocked on all directions, because Leah represents the Penimios, as opposed to Rachel, which represents the externalities. And so it says here that it's sealed in all directions. With the illumination of the two brain lobes, which are Chokhmah and Bina, engraved in it. That is because Leah and Rachel are the internality and externality of the overall nukva. The internality is represented by the Partsuf Leah, and the externality is represented by the Partsufim Rachel. Leah is formed from the Malchus of Bina, and Rachel is formed by the Malchus of Chokhmah. For this reason, she's called Rachel, which means sheep. And so the color of a sheep is white. So we find that it states the illumination of the two brain lobes, an example, Chokhmah and Bina, are engraved in it, an example, into the female. Thus it's saying the building, the back part of the nukva of Zaranpin. It is attached to the male side from the back, and hence it is called my dove, my undefiled Tamati. And do not pronounce it Tamati, but rather Teomati, my twin sister. For this word, for twin, is also the same word for the astrological zodiacal sign of Gemini, which happens to be the twin. And so then therefore it's don't read my dove, my undefiled, but rather read my dove, my twin sister. And furthermore, don't read it in context of the twin sister of Zaranpin, but rather understand that it is twin sisters. An example, Leah and Rachel. Because Leah and Rachel are said to be twins. In fact, so much so that when Yaakov went to lay with Leah, he actually thought he was laying with Rachel. He was unable to perceive the difference between them. So it says, the hair of the nukva, which is Malchus, includes the colors white, red, and green, and is called purple, as is written, in the hair of your head like purple, Shirah Shirim 7:6. It is connected to 5 gevuros. From her aspect of gevura, Malchus expands to become attached to the side of the male. So why does it say the color is purple? That's because if you take a look at the very first image that I share, you will notice that the chasadim enter inside of the Partsufim called Leah. It was also explained in the Book of Dragons, Book 10, that the chasadim that enter into Leah is the secret of the chamor, the donkey. They pool inside of her Yisad because she gives birth to Yehuda, and this hints to Mashiach ben David, which is the one riding in on the chamor, the donkey, because he's formed primarily of these chasadim. And we find that in the Partsufim of Rachel are the 5 gevuros. These 5 gevuros follow the same likeness as it does in Zoranpen, mainly that the gevuros enter into her da'as, spread from that point through her partsuf, chesed, gevur, tifres, netzach, and hod, and they pool inside of her yisod. Yisod is called a pit. And so it was said earlier in Book 22 that should your ox or donkey fall into a pit, thus the gevuros personify the ox that fall into a pit, and the chasadim personify the chamor that fall into a pit, the donkey. Furthermore, just as it was with Leah, who in order of sons births Yehuda, who is the personification of this yisod of her aspect, in which it is said Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and then Yehuda. These are Chesed or Reuben, Shimon or Gevura, Levi or Tiferes, and Yehuda, which is Yisod. These are called the 4 legs of the throne. This is in the aspect of Leah. However, in the aspect of Rachel, these Gevuros personify into her Yisod as well, from which she gives birth to a child. In various texts, this spreading of Chesadim and spreading of Gevuros is likened to the Mayim Nukvin, or the feminine waters, which lead to arousal and thus childbirth. The general idea here is that Rachel gives birth to Yosef. Yosef overall personifies the sphere of Yisod. Thus he's called the firstlings of his herd, or the ox. This is because the sharosh, or root of this divine matter inside of the Shekhinah, is the root of Mashiach ben Yosef. It is said that the nukva has purple. Why purple? Because when you combine the color red and blue, that is to say, the color of the chasadim with inside of the partsuf called Leah, and the gevuros, the red inside of the partsufim called Rachel, they form the color purple, because blue and red make the color purple. In fact, these are the 3 curtain colors inside of the holy place, which led to the Holy of Holies. The curtains on the right and left were blue and red, respectfully, and the center was purple. Thus it says that the nukva is in the secret of purple, because it's the idea that they are one. An example that Leah and Rachel represent one, an example of the Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah is a personification of an internality and an externality, very much so to how Abba was with inside of Ima. The picture that I just sent into the group also personifies this idea, in which at the very top of it you will see the Tifres, Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima, forming the Chokmah, Bina, and Da'as of Zeranpin, as it has been explained. You will also see that within inside the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Ima are contained the Netzach, Hod, and Yisod of Abba. This is the secret of the verse in which it is written to have wisdom and understanding. We find this in Sefer Yetzirah. In the Tanakh, we find this in Shir Hashirim in the following verse, and his right hand embraces me. This is the idea that the right is inside of the left, or wisdom is inside of understanding. That is to say that the spheros of Abba are inside of the spheros of Bina. We also see this in the flow of the channels of the sphirot, from which we say Keter, and then into Chokhmah, and from Chokhmah into Bina. So, as shown in the final diagram there, the Netzach Hod Yisod of Ima formed the Chokhmah Bina Das of Zeranpin, and as it was explained that the Malchus is in the chamber of Yisod, and so therefore, when the Netzach Hod Yisod of Ima formed the Chokhmah Bina Das of Zeranpin, her Malchus is connected to his Das via the backside. And it is unable to stay attached to Zeranpin because it is a feminine partsuf. And because Zeranpin is masculine, it causes the Malchus to emerge outside of that partsuf, thus personifying the partsuf called Leah. You will see this here in the image. You will see Yisod of Ima connecting to Da'as, and then you'll see an arrow, a black arrow, which points to the left to the partsuf called Leah. Again, it was explained that Leah is the personification of the Malchus of Ima, for the following reasons: that her name is a saruf of Ochel, as in Ochel Moed, the tent of meeting, and also in the secret of the letters Aleph, Lamed, and Chay of Elokim, which hints to this partial aspect of Ima, which is also by the same name, Elokim. You will find that the Yisod of Abba spreads all the way down into the Tiferes of Zeranpin and to the Yisod of Zeranpin, by which causes the Malchus of Abba to emerge, which personifies the partsuf of Rachel, which hints to this sheep, for the sheep has white wool, and the secret of the whiteness of Chokmah. And again, when they combine, they represent the Shekhinah as a totality, and thus she is red and blue. When combined together, is viewed as purple. So this is a very, very, very deep section. There's 2 parshas. And this particular portion of Chazinu, this particular portion of the Zohar, is inaccessible. I know that it's completely inaccessible because there are errors and mistakes in every single one of the writings of the Hachamim regarding this matter. It's a bold statement, but it's the facts. I know this because there is no place where they have properly allocated the Chesadim into the Partsufim of Leah, as it has been shown for the first time and the first time only in that tikkun that was compiled on that Ilan Gedal. That tikkun was not copied from anywhere and only exists in that Ilan, by which it's been shown to you all. Because they made a mistake by not fully and clearly and concisely understanding the matter, they confused the Malchus of Ima personifying the partsuf of Leah as a type of Gevuros that entered into Leah. And so all of their writings state that it was Gevuros that entered into Leah and not Chesadim. However, though, there really is no contradiction, because the Chesadim and Gevuros of Ima are both considered Gevuros in relation to that of Abba, which those aspects of Abba, both Gevuros and Chesadim, are considered Chesadim, whether it be Gevuros or Chesadim. So there is a reconciliation to the matter. However, because the matter was not fully established or understood or revealed, there are errors regarding all of these matters. And regarding the secret of Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, there is not a single Kabbalistic text in the world or a tikkun that has ever been written outside of the one that you guys are currently looking at, which tells you where Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David's Shirosh is, rectifying why it's called ox and donkey and pit, that exists. They're all not covering this subject. The roots in the Shorosh of Mashiach is mentioned nowhere in Eitz Chaim. Not a single place, anywhere in the writings of Chaim Vital does he deal with the situation. However, it is hinted at in Kenot Hashem Zeva'ot, but the matter is not fully fleshed out as to explain the Shorosh, or the root of the matter. The same thing with the origin of the Chesadim and the Gevuros, which is only hinted at in a very obscure page of Vayadat Hashem, the knowledge of God written by Chaim Vital. And yet, even there, that tikkun is not fleshed out to explain the matter fully there either. Because there's no tikkun that's actually shown in those sections. It's just explained in words. So, it's a very momentous and miraculous thing to have these tikkuns, especially for this particular portion, to rectify these very, very intricate matters that have to deal with the nature of the nukva. Hashem willing, I'll one day compile these teachings into a proper commentary on Chazinu. But for now, that will conclude this lesson. Consider very carefully about the spreading of the Chesadim, the Gevuros, the blue, the red, how and why Leah is emerging from this place, how and why Rachel is emerging. You can see how cryptic the Idra is, how incredibly lofty its subject matter is. When you are able to finally follow along and behold and witness to the tikkuns, you can see how concise, and you can also see my words when I stated that nobody should be studying the Lurianic Kabbalah without having a complete mastery of the Zohar. The reason why is because the very logic and reasoning behind the Lurianic Kabbalah is only found in the Zohar. And without the Zohar, an example, without the Ijra Rabbah, Ijra Zuta, which are inaccessible without the rest of it, there just simply is no way to understand the wisdom and logic behind true Lurianic Kabbalah. That is to say, Eitz Chaim is an inaccessible text. When you look at these types of tikkuns, well, how do we know the Netzach Hod Yisod forms the Hokmah and Da'as? How do we know the Malchus of Ima emerges from Da'as? Reasoning is entirely derived from the Zohar. The Zohar is giving us the instructions to build the tikkuns and build the constructs that map the upper worlds. This was the great mystery. However, though, in modern times, as I've stated, 99.9% of what is called Kabbalah is not true Kabbalah. As stated in the video with Garment, there is no true Kabbalah without Ilanot. No Ilan, no map, no real Kabbalah. It could be Drosh, Midrashim, and expositions, but not true Kabbalah. True Kabbalah is science. It's God science, God math. It's very concise, very particular. And those who know its ways can see its manifestations purely. The last thing that I will add, I suppose, is that we can see as Malchus is called Et. How do we ground this in reality? So I'll reveal this for the first time as well, although I've hinted to it in a couple of places. But nonetheless, Zeran Pin is likened to the goof, the body. And so we can find that Da'as on the body is a personification of our lungs. And therefore we can see that Malchus, which is called Et, Aleph to Tav, the 22 letters, emanates outside of our lungs, and it moves to the outside of our Partsuf, an example, outside of our body. So we can see that as Leah is emerging outside of Zerayin Pin's Partsuf, we see that in our physical body by the 22 letters emanating from our lungs outside of our body. And what is the purpose of this? It's for Binah, because remember, this is the Malchus of Binah. Well, what does Binah mean? It means understanding. Tavunah, to understand something. And so therefore the purpose of the 22 letters emanating from our lungs to the outside of our body is for the purpose of understanding. An example, communication. And that is the sod of what this is really referring to and how we can apply it in day-to-day life. You can actually witness the Partsuf Leah emanating from your lungs every single time you speak. And this is how the Holy One, blessed be He, designed such a miraculous process and what it's really hinting to. Furthermore, Rachel is also called S. And the height of Rachel is from Tiferes. An example, the lower 2/3 of Tiferes to be precise, which is the lower midsection of the chest, whose height is to the Yisod. This height is the exact height of where the womb is in the woman. An example, this is the location of where the baby is stored. And what's the purpose of this? Because this is the personification of the Partsufim called Rachel. Rachel, which means sheep, her entire interaction was about being upset that she could not bear children. Thus, she is the secret of the child. And she's in the secret of something living, as opposed to Bina, which is not something living, but rather something that's inanimate, just like words or sound or letters emanating from the lungs isn't something living, whereas the baby is something living because it's the Malchus of Abba, and a certain wisdom gives life to its possessor. And it too is the secret of the 22 letters because it's called eight. It's the tree on top of tree, the tree of the face and the keter of the tree of the body, formed by the 22 letters. And then it emerges from Yisod, etc. So consider very carefully about the practical applications of what the Partsuf of Leah entails. Notice how your sound emanates from your lungs outside of your body. Remember, this Malchus has to emerge outside of the body. Consider how a baby in the womb is in the height from the lower 2/3 of Tiferes and reaches to the reproductive organ in Yisod. And look at the roundness of the belly of a pregnant woman and consider the height of the belly, the height of its extension, which is the lower 2/3 part of the chest, to the reproductive organ. And also consider how the Partsufim of Rachel must also emerge from Zeranpin. For example, it must also emerge from the goof. Consider how the baby starts off inside of, just like the sound starts off inside of the lungs, but then just as Leah has to emerge in the secret of sound, the baby must also emerge as well from the goof in the secret of the Partsufim of Rachel. And there are many more deep, wondrous, and miraculous things that I could say about these matters, things that would boggle the mind. I'll give you just a drop. Another explanation. I explained to you now that Leah is the secret of the sound emanating from the lungs. And I also explained to you that she comes from the name Elohim, because this was the name of Hashem corresponding to of Binah. Thus, we can see the Netzach Hod Yisod of Ima create the Hokmah Bina Das of Zerampin. We can see this in another light. We can see that the Hokmah Bina Das of Zerampin refers to the brain, and the Netzach Hod Yisod refer to the two hips and the reproductive organ of the mother. Ima means mother. Thus, this refers to pregnancy. And so we can find a baby is located in between these three locations, Netzach, Hod, and Yisod. At this time, Hokmah Bina and Da'as of the baby is developed. It's developed in the secret of 9 months of pregnancy because the name Elohim is a numerical value of 86. 86 for her Netzach, 86 for her Hod, and 86 for her Yisod. 86 days for the 86 lights. 86 days is roughly 3 months. Thus, there's 3 months for all the lights of Netzach and one brain to develop. 86 days for Hod, or roughly 3 months for all the brains of Venus develop. And then the final brains is her Yisod, the final 3 months of pregnancy from month 6 to month 9 are the 86 lights in her Yisod, which become the baby's Da'as. And at that time, all those lights have been transmitted into Zerampin, and the baby literally is born from the mother's Yisod. And the first thing that happens is the Partsufim Leah emerges immediately. How do we know? Because this is the first sound that a baby makes. As soon as that baby is born, as soon as Yisod has finished its development of the Kalim, immediately the Malchus of Ima must emerge. And what is the Malchus of Ima? As soon as the Yisod has fully transferred its lights, as soon as the baby has been birthed from Ima's Yisod, immediately the baby cries. And immediately Malchus emanates from its da'as. And there are even more wondrous things. And had this timeline been more meritable, I would be able to speak. But in this timeline, I do not have permission to speak any further than the things I've already revealed. Those things are saved for another timeline and Olam Haba. So with that being said, as David HaMelech said, open my eyes and may behold the wonders of your Torah. Amen. Shalom and Salah.
Thank you.
And